Good morning. Hi, my name is James. This is James Loves Games. Welcome to JLG POD, episode number 4. We are talking this week about remakes. Now, Tuesday, we talked about sort of the state in general of remakes in gaming, how really they're a good thing for both devs and the fans, for the most part, in terms of generating revenue for the developers and the publishers, and for reviving old franchises and letting people wallow in their beloved nostalgia. It's great stuff. Today I want to talk about my own personal top 10 wish list for remakes, and if I have time, I'll go over a couple of honorable mentions as well. Good to see you, Dwayne Johnson and Renata Flake in the chat. Thank you very much. Also, thanks again to Rena Habak for her membership. Appreciate it very much. Let's go with the remakes, says Dwayne. Let's go. So, as I said, this is my own personal wish list, my top 10 wish list. I slapped this together, and I've put some thought into this. Some of you might laugh at my list, but the heart wants what it wants. This is just some things that I wish, or I hope that some devs are brewing up in some secret lab somewhere in Tokyo or California or something. But anyway, here we go. Let's see. Where's my list? It's on this tab. Remake wish list. Number 10. And this is going to sound really dumb, but Super Mario Kart. Okay? Now hear me out. Hear me out before you get out your pitchforks. James, what are you talking about? They come out with a new Super Mario Kart like every couple of years. Why do you need to remake Super Mario Kart? I'm talking specifically about the first Super Mario Kart, the one for the Super Nintendo, which is still my personal favorite Mario Kart game and one of my favorite games of all time. To me, it really encapsulates the pure funness of Super Mario Kart before it got too much overboard about items. And this has kind of been a complaint about Mario Kart of mine over the years, is that, it's nice that they've added more accessibility options. I'm not going to complain about that kind of stuff. And, in Mario Kart 8, what they have with, they've got the little antenna you can put on your cart so that you don't go out of bounds off of the road, or the one where it automatically hits the gas for you. So you don't have to keep mashing down the A button to get the gas going. I'm not talking about those features. Those are fine because I know a lot of little kids want to play Mario Kart games. But I do feel like the game has kind of shifted away from racing as a skill and has turned into more RNG. Which items are you going to get at the last second to push you up into first place? And it's just kind of annoying, especially playing online. It just turns into, shell throwing fest, and you can be the most skilled racer, the most skilled driver, and have a really good run completely ruined over and over again. And when it rains, it pours. If you're in first place, you get blue shelled online, you're done. It's just like you get blue shelled, and then it's like you get red shelled, you get bullet billed, you get lightning bolted, and then before you know it, you're in 8th place with no hope of recovery, of course, in the 3rd lap. And I don't really see that as a racing game. I feel like the items that were available in the original Mario Kart, first of all, were a little bit more reasonable. They didn't have the blue shells. I think they had lightning bolts, but they were very, very rare. But it was really all about maneuvering around the course successfully. And the courses were actually pretty difficult to navigate. And that's what I really enjoyed about it, because it gave you the opportunity to, level up your skills as a racer. And drifting was really kind of necessary. I also really like that they had some shortcuts in there that were very high risk, high reward. You know, particularly there was one in one of the haunted houses where there was like a little platform. If you had the guts, you could jump over a little gap and get around one of the big larger curves in the track. And if you failed, you're done. You're done. You're going into a pit. And I really enjoyed the controls and the feel of that one. So here's what I'm proposing. Okay, it's not just like a full blown all the way remake. I would be satisfied with an HD 2D gussying up of Super Mario Kart. You know, if you take the original, because the thing holding it back are the graphics, and I don't really want to take that gameplay and put it into all the way modern Mario Kart graphics like you see in Mario Kart 8. I would prefer to see some kind of unique look like they do with like Octopath Traveler, for example. The HD 2D style of graphical upgrade would be really cool. Also, more tracks. You know, I loved most of the tracks in Super Mario Kart. Some of them were downright annoying, but I feel like it had the best in terms of racing, like pure core racing. And the battle mode was still really good too, but you know, it could use some work. And I missed the feather. Like, why did they take the feather out of Super Mario Kart, out of the Mario Kart series, where you could jump over walls and stuff? Like, what a great way to showcase your skill with an item, as opposed to just throwing it and, you know, getting an easy kill or whatever. But anyway, that's number 10, Super Mario Kart. Renata Flake says, Wii Mario Kart is goated. Wii was pretty good. And thank you very much, Dwayne. That's a good one. That would be a good remake in 4K. It would be really fun. And like I said, I would settle for just a slight graphical overhaul and a couple extra levels. This is not something anybody anywhere is working on. Guaranteed. I'm just thinking if I could like mod Super Mario Kart to add more things, if it were on PC, I don't know. But that was number 10, Super Mario Kart. Again, not going to happen. This is just my wish list, but you know, there it is. Super Mario Kart. I love it. Number 9, this one is, I think I mentioned on Tuesday, I think the era of gaming that's most ripe for remakes is the Nintendo 64, PS1 era of gaming, because I mean, you had a lot of innovation gameplay wise, and a lot of classic titles that are beloved by many during that era. But the graphical step that was taken from Super Nintendo to basically from 2D sprites to 3D polygons, I mean, it was pretty rough. Those PS1 games and N64 games are pretty rough looking. And I remember thinking as a kid, like, games like Yoshi's Island on Super Nintendo look really good. And then when Star Fox came out, there were a lot of people saying like, oh, wow, the graphics are amazing. And I remember thinking like, are they? It's just a bunch of squares. It's literally colored squares, like glued together. And I understand now sort of the concept behind it. You know, we've got a game with actual 3D models as the enemies and as the characters, which is a huge achievement on hardware like the Super Nintendo. But you know, the PS1 continued that tradition. We've got 3D models, but I mean, it's jagged triangles. It's just jagged shapes with colors on them for the most part. Nintendo 64 is no better. And so, you know, the games are able to create these massive worlds and really do things that the Super Nintendo just couldn't do. But it just didn't look that great. And so I think that era of gaming really, there's an opportunity there just to improve the graphics and revive a lot of beloved franchise. One such beloved franchise, number 9, Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. Now, I know I harp on Star Wars quite a bit as being kind of overplayed, overdone. Disney has taken the Star Wars sponge and just squeezed it until their hands are, all bloody and the sponge is as dry as the Sahara Desert. But Shadows of the Empire was real greatness. And I don't really mean the game itself. The game was okay. It was a pretty good game. But the story itself, if you're unfamiliar with Shadows of the Empire, takes place between episode 5 and episode 6. So after the events on Bespin, Han Solo gets taken by Boba Fett to Jabba the Hutt. And then episode 6 starts, and it's just Luke Skywalker showing up at Jabba's palace to free Han Solo. Shadows of the Empire deals with everything that happens in between. And you've got a whole cast of characters that you never see in a movie. Like, I don't remember the names. It's been a long time. But you've got, another bounty hunter friend of Han Solo's, and a crime lord. Princess Leia has to go undercover to seduce this crime lord, and IG-88 is there, and it's a whole thing. And it's really, it's going to bother me if I don't look up the guy's name. Do your research, James. This is what I'm always saying. Do your research. Dash Rendar. That's the one. Wow. That brings back memories. Dash Rendar, the main character of Shadows of the Empire. So you take control of this bounty hunter, and you're helping Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker to hunt down wherever Han Solo is. And it's just a really good story. It's really interesting. It was originally a book. It was a novel. It was written. And for whatever reason, it became a game on the Nintendo 64. And it was really cool because it had some neat mechanics in the game where you fly around on a jetpack. You get your little blaster pistol. And it was good. The IG-88 fight in particular I remember being difficult. But you're fighting bounty hunters and stuff. You fight Boba Fett. And so it was really cool, and you get a good look at some lesser known, or for the most part unknown, Star Wars characters. And I think it would be really cool. It would be a really good time. I mean, Disney, if you're listening, this is a money printing machine, right? Star Wars. You're gonna pretty much create. If somebody in a meeting says Star Wars at Disney, they're like, okay, we'll do that. Let's make that right now. Do it yesterday. And here's an opportunity. This could be a huge hit. Make it on modern systems. Give it the Jedi Fallen Order treatment. And could be really fun. So get on that. Bob Iger, quit, taking all these actors' money and go make a good show. I don't know. Dwayne Johnson says, talking about Star Wars / Han Solo, I'm looking forward to the new modern Star Wars game we're getting next year. What game is that? I don't know that I'm familiar with that. Anyway, so Star Wars, yes. I have a love-hate relationship with Star Wars. I love some of it and I hate some of it. That's just the way it goes. Number 8, another another Nintendo 64 classic that is in dire need of a remake or a graphical overhaul, and really a control overhaul. Really just the whole thing needs to be remade from scratch. And I played it on the stream not too long ago. GoldenEye 007. Now, this is also a beloved franchise for many. It's a classic, and a lot of gamers my age, gamers of a certain age, will look fondly in their adolescent years at all the times they played multiplayer, split-screen GoldenEye with each other. And you've got a huge opportunity here. People love playing, multiplayer, online, fighting each other, shooters. But, me personally, I'm kind of burnt out on games like Call of Duty, Battlefield. The big, let's make this as realistic as possible. Put as many people as possible into the fight. It kind of loses its impact after a while. And you can only make games look as realistic up to a point before you start to think, is there anything else going on here besides just making it look like real life? And I feel like that's kind of where a lot of modern shooters have ended up. It's like they put all their focus on realism, and then you get to the point where it looks real enough and you get diminishing returns with each generation of graphical upgrades. So what are we left with? And I feel like GoldenEye is a good opportunity to make a fun mission-based first-person shooter game with the campaign. You know, you could really flesh it out more and add a lot of new things to it. But you got an opportunity to sort of recreate a multiplayer experience more akin to, you know, like classic Halo, where you've got small groups of people playing online, maybe eight people in a group, plus split screen. You know, bring back split screen. You get a lot of people. Me personally, I like playing shooters with people in the same room as me. And you got an opportunity, but do it online too. Get a 4v4 GoldenEye match going in a lot of those classic levels with those classic weapons. I mean, it would be a hit. Maybe it wouldn't have the longevity of something like Warzone or Battle Royale type of game, but you know, I would like it. So if somebody please make it. I know the issue is like licensing when it comes to GoldenEye because you've got a lot of moving pieces. You know, you've got Nintendo and Rare and the Broccoli family who made James Bond originally, and of course probably the movie company MGM is going to get involved. And so getting all of these corporate entities to work together towards a common goal where, you know, they're all not going to make millions of dollars is probably a difficult endeavor. But there you go. GoldenEye would be number 8 for my remake list. Dwayne Johnson says it's Star Wars Outlaws, James. Oh yes, I know this game. I remember that one. Yes, that could be really cool. Dwayne Johnson also says, oh yes, 1,000,000,000,000% definitely would love that 100% remake for GoldenEye. Awesome. Yes. I think it would be a hit. And you don't even need to make it crazy, you know, just like I said, graphical overhaul, some new controls, and some online multiplayer could be really good. I mean, I'm pretty sure whenever they remastered or whatever, GoldenEye for the Nintendo Switch and for Xbox, I mean, people played it, right? So let's just make a whole new thing. But again, this is my totally out there wish list. None of this stuff is probably ever going to get made. We'll see. I bet some of it will eventually. Some of it will. Perhaps number 7, which I already talked about on Tuesday, Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid is without a doubt my favorite in the Metal Gear franchise. It's, you know, you had the original NES games and Game Boy games or whatever, the 8-bit era Metal Gear games. And then you had Metal Gear Solid on the PS1. And that was a game that truly hyped me up. I think that was the most hyped I'd ever been for a game up to that point, for sure. I got a couple different magazine subscriptions every month, and boy, I read up everything on Metal Gear Solid. I was obsessed. And when it finally came out, it's pretty funny actually. I had it pre-ordered at like a Best Buy or something, and my mom picked it up on the way home from work for me. Good mom. Thank you, Mom. She picked it up and brought it home. And so I was so hyped. And so like we ate dinner, and then it was a Friday, of course. It's Friday night. I'm in 9th grade, so I'm like 14 years old. I'm hyped. I get upstairs. Oh, it's finally here. Put the game in and, you know, put the disc in, start it up. And, you know, it's a PS1, so you get the boom, boom. And then whenever it's a Konami game, you get the I don't think it actually made the noise on Metal Gear Solid 1, but you know what I'm talking about. The old Konami logo. It's like little yellow and orange S shapes. I get to that point. All right. I'm super hyped. I've been looking forward to this game for years, which to a 14-year-old is a large chunk of my life. The phone rings. It's my best friend. Hey, what are you doing tonight? You wanna come spend the night? Dude. I'm in the middle of something. What are you doing? Playing Metal Gear Solid. Oh, bring it over. Dude. So I took it over to his house, took PS1 over, and we pretty much played through like the first 2/3 of that game that night. Pretty much until the sun came up. And it was awesome. It's a very nice gaming memory of mine. And then, of course, I had to go home and beat the rest of the game by myself, piecemeal. And so I was every day at school, I'd show up and tell him what happened. I'd be like, "Oh yeah," and then there was this fighter jet that came down, and you had to like dodge the missiles from the fighter jet and shoot it with rockets. And it was a great game. It really was. It introduced a lot of new gaming mechanics. The story, it was just weird enough. And I touched on this last time, I think. It was just weird enough. You had some weird enemies, Vulcan Raven and Revolver Ocelot and Sniper Wolf and Psycho Mantis. The Psycho Mantis thing where it would like read your memory card was crazy. Like if you had save files on your PlayStation memory card that were from another Konami game, like Psycho Mantis could read it. It was weird. And I don't remember what game I had on there, but it was like it was like a mental trick. He was trying to psych you out. Psycho Mantis. And he would say like, "Oh, I see you're a fan of Ridge Racer," or something like that. And it's like, "Whoa, how did he know? Oh my gosh." And it was really cool. So a graphical overhaul of that game would be amazing. Give it some modern graphics, give it some modern controls, and maybe expand it a little bit. Make some of the fights not so silly, to where the AI is just kind of like, huh? And I think you got yourself a hit. Now, Metal Gear Solid 3 or Metal Gear Solid Delta is coming out, I think, next year. I don't remember. I don't know if they actually gave a release date for that one. But hopefully that sells well enough to where they start thinking, hey, we should do the first one. If they do Metal Gear Solid 2 before they do Metal Gear Solid Remake, I would be upset. I really want the first one. Because it was just right. It was just right. It was really good. It was really great. Dwayne Johnson asked, aren't there supposed to be a new James Bond game in the works? I feel like there's always kind of a James Bond game in development, or at least rumored to be in development. And for the most part, they're not very good. There'd be a lot of movie tie-ins and things like that. And I think there's been a couple of Bond games that were unrelated to any movies. They were just kind of like original James Bond IPs. And for whatever reason, they just can't recapture that lightning in a bottle that was GoldenEye. And it's kind of disappointing. They all turn into kind of like generic third-person or first-person action shooters that don't really do anything great. And I feel like a lot of publishers, or maybe people that wear suits and make millions of dollars that make these decisions, don't really understand why GoldenEye was as popular as it was. They just kind of see the common elements. They're like, okay, James Bond game, you shoot the guns, you play against each other. That's all you need. Just do that. And it's like, you're like 2/3 of the way there. Okay. You just, you're missing that heart, that essence. But Dwayne Johnson also says, oh my God, yes, I so want this. I know we're getting the claims collection, but having the first one remake would be amazing. Yes, they did. Okay, kudos to Konami or whomever for releasing sort of like these remastered versions that you could download bit by bit or as a set. So you can get Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, 3 in the PlayStation Store, which is really cool. I might end up getting Metal Gear Solid, just the remaster, and playing through that. Could be pretty cool. But I want like it fully developed from the ground up with all new stuff. Yeah, it could be really good. Anyway, time ticks away as usual. Number 6, and this is one I feel I don't want this one. Obviously, it's number 6. It's not number 1. I don't want it more than any other game remake, but I feel like this one needs to get made just so that more people will have the opportunity to play this game. Because this is one of those games that I felt like really didn't get a fair shake because it was only on one console, and people just, the internet and internet reviews and discourse about gaming really wasn't as much of a thing when it came out. So if it came out today, it would be a huge hit, or at least a cult underground favorite. Number 6, Eternal Darkness. Now, this was a GameCube original. It was a GameCube exclusive, and this game was nuts. I mean, I would never have expected one of the best horror type games I've ever played to have been on a Nintendo exclusive, a Nintendo console exclusive. Crazy. And so the thing about it that was so great was it wasn't just, jump scares or here's some monsters or things like that. I mean, it truly dove right into like psychological scares. Like the game is trying to scare you. The game is aware of you as the person playing the game. And it was just very unnerving. And it dealt with a lot of this sort of Lovecraftian, horrible demons living in the world, ancient evils from space or whatever. And so you've got this kind of ancient evil that lives in the world, and it has been taking over people for generations, for thousands of years. And so you play through several different storylines through different time periods that are all sort of related to this evil entity. And I mean, it was horrifying. And there was also like the sanity sort of meter where the game would get all funky and messed up as your character goes more and more insane. And again, kind of like the Psycho Mantis fight, where the game kind of tricks you into thinking it's sentient. There was a part of this one where you're playing through it and the game just sort of like glitches and you get a blue screen. And it's like, what's going on? And then it says deleting memory card. And you're like, what is happening? And like the game actually like freaks you out and convinces you that like it is bugged out and is ruining all of your other game saves. And truly terrifying for a gamer. But it used a lot of different tricks that were very original at the time. And it was just it was an unsettling game. Like I said, it wasn't like a boo, you're scared kind of thing, but it was just like, I feel very uncomfortable. I do not want to continue playing this, but I know I must. So the fact that it was only on GameCube was so strange to me. At least I keep saying that. I'm fairly certain it was only on GameCube. It could have been on maybe like PC or something. No, it was only on GameCube. I was right. And I still have my copy of this game. So like I can plop it in my Wii and play it as much as I want. But, I mean, it came out in 2002, still looks kind of like butt. It looks okay, but it's like, it kind of takes you out at this point. When you go back and play a lot of these older games, early 2000s kind of games, you think like, what? I remember it looking pretty good for its time. And you go back and play it and you're like, nah, that doesn't look very good. So it needs an upgrade desperately. And I think with all of the discourse around horror games and the number of people who love playing horror games, really unique, fun horror games, not just, PT clones and things like that, but like something new. Eternal Darkness could be the thing that, pushes more people to play horror games. But it was really good. Ben Boyd, welcome to the show. Eternal Darkness. I literally just checked in and knew exactly what you're talking about. Awesome. Yes, it's got fans. It's a cult favorite. It's just the availability of it is not there. It's not something that you can just go get in the eShop. It's not something that you can just play on your PC, get it on Steam or whatever. Like, it's only on the GameCube. So unless you have a GameCube or a Wii and the original disc, you're not playing it. So this is a shame to me. I think at the very least, if they're not going to make a remake, Nintendo, I would love for them to just put it available in the Switch eShop. Like, I would play it on the Switch as is, like warts and all. I would do a streaming series and play through it just as it is. So I honestly, I would settle for that. I don't need a remake. I just need a port. That's how much I like this game. So yeah, Eternal Darkness, number 6. Let's see. Where's my list? All right, number 5. So we're going to get into a portion here where you're all probably going to laugh at me. You're going to gradually laugh at me more and more and probably judge me. And that's okay. That's why we're here. We're here to discuss this. We're here to just put all our feelings out on the table. What kind of games we want remade. One last swig of coffee for me. Number 5, we're into the latter half of our list. Number 5, Final Fantasy Tactics. And Tactics is one of my favorite Final Fantasies. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It's one that I go back to regularly. The gameplay is solid. It's if you're unfamiliar, it's obviously it's not one of the main entry series of the Final Fantasy games. Came out right around the time as Final Fantasy VII on the PS1. And the graphics really are not bad for a PS1 game. A lot of the 3D elements that are used are for just the shape of the battleground. But the characters themselves are 2D sprites. And so it almost has the look of like an HD 2D style game like Octopath Traveler, because you've got sprites mixed with polygons. And I kind of feel like that HD 2D style of graphics that you see a lot these days is probably inspired at least a little bit by Final Fantasy Tactics. They look very similar. And so really, like, I don't necessarily need a total remake overhaul of Final Fantasy Tactics. I think the gameplay itself is solid. It's not really action oriented. It's not, it wasn't like a shooting game before there were dual sticks on the controller type of situation, like some games, like maybe Star Wars Shadows of the Empire or GoldenEye. It's a tactical RPG. And so you're really just moving the cursor and inputting commands from menus and things like that. And so, technically it's not very complicated gameplay wise. And it's fine as it is in that regard. I feel like it could use a graphical overhaul still because, some of it looks a little funky. At the very least, you could put some polish on it, put some particle effects, and make it run a little better. I know during some of those fights, when you have a lot of enemies on the screen, you can rotate the battlefield around and you can do a lot of like summons and things like that. And sometimes the effects and the motion will be a bit much for the PS1 hardware. And so if you could get something really cool like that, and just go over the top with the particle effects, and the lighting, get some new lighting, I would be very pleased if I could get Tactics with some actual voice acting. This was before you had voice acting in games a lot of the times, and it was just, it's text. But Tactics, the story, is so engrossing and large in scope. It's very dramatic, and it's very, it's this kind of cliche to say at this point, but it's very Game of Thrones, medieval intrigue, drama, backstabbing, empires toppling, that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of really heartfelt, emotional moments that I feel would carry more if it was with an actual voice, with somebody acting out these parts instead of just reading that in a text box. If done correctly. My biggest gripe with Final Fantasy VII Remake was the voice acting and the writing itself. They changed a lot of it, and it was just the dialogue was just mind-numbingly, ridiculous. But the dialogue and Tactics was solid, and the story was follow, especially if you're like 13. But I still struggled through it and enjoyed it a lot. So Final Fantasy Tactics, kind of like Super Mario Kart, just like update the graphics a little bit. You don't need to do like a total overhaul, but up the performance, up the lighting, up the particle effects, give me some voices. The soundtrack's perfect. Don't change a thing. So Tactics, it's still good. I mean, I could play it as it is right now on the PS1. It's been ported over to other systems, and so you can play it that way. So it's still really good. It doesn't need a remake, but I want one regardless. I'm just being selfish. So there we go. Dwayne Johnson has got to go back to work. I'll rewatch again later. Bye for now, James. Thanks for popping in, Dwayne. I appreciate you very much. So yeah, Tactics. Number 4, Final Fantasy IX. Okay, we're getting into it. You're going to see quickly like why it's the next couple ones in my list are silly. Final Fantasy IX. And this is one, I'm certainly not alone in this one. We're getting into territory where it's like, oh yeah, duh, we need a remake of this one. And in fact, I don't remember the name of it, but somebody or some group of people have actually been working on like a port of this. It's like a fan-made remake that folks have been working on. I don't remember what it was called, but it was some kind of, I've seen it on Twitter. Give me just a second. The Memoria Project, Final Fantasy IX Memoria Project, and some fans have gotten together and given a total graphical overhaul to Final Fantasy IX. And it's basically a PC mod of Final Fantasy IX. And I don't know that it's actually available right now. I think there's a gameplay demo. But either way, like, there is demand for this. There is so much demand to the point where people are actually just like making it themselves, literally. So I think with the success of Final Fantasy VII Remake, you're going to get a lot more people clamoring for other remakes of Final Fantasy games, older Final Fantasy games, like 9. And 9's a classic. I feel like 9 didn't really get enough time in the limelight when it came out. It was, stuck between 8 and 10, right? And it was released really on the last dying breath of the PS1 era. I think at that point, the PS2 was already out. I might be incorrect about that. Again, do your research, James. It came out in July 2000. Final Fantasy IX did. July 2000. And I want to say the PS2 came out in August 2000. Let me see. In Japan, March 2000. North America, October 2000. So July, August, September, October. We're 3 months from the PS2 is when they released this poor game. And it was fine. I mean, it was a good game. It was great. It was very popular. It wasn't like super popular, but like the fan base grew. And I think the Final Fantasy IX fans are a special type of fan. Obviously they're very patient type of fan, but Final Fantasy VII gets all the love. Final Fantasy VII gets all the attention. Final Fantasy VII is the golden child of Square Enix. And I, for one, I liked Final Fantasy VII, the original. And at the time, it was revolutionary. I really enjoyed it. I still enjoy it from time to time. But I do feel like enough is enough. Like, Final Fantasy VII has gotten more than enough attention from everybody. It's just like Disney and Star Wars. We've squozed all we can squoze. Those are not words, but I think they illustrate my point. We have squozed the sponge till you can't squoze no more. It's dry. And let's give some attention to some of these other games like Final Fantasy IX, which, again, the gameplay's solid. It's just it's standard RPG, gameplay, turn-based, menu-based. There's no action elements to Final Fantasy IX. I do wish that they would take out the random enemy encounters. I've never been a fan of random enemy encounters, so any remake that I would like of an RPG would get rid of those. I want to see the enemies on the map and choose to engage or not. The soundtrack's amazing. We could use voice acting. Again, very emotional, dramatic experience. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in 9 in particular for some comedy. I remember it being a very funny game with a lot of funny characters. And so if you can put some voices to that dialogue, it has the potential to be very good and memorable. And graphically, obviously, that's where it needs the most help, which is why this Memoria project has, they've taken upon themselves to just make it. And it does look pretty cool. But everybody really wants something official. And there are rumors floating around. There are a lot of rumors floating around. And I don't know if this is just wishful thinking on their part for being desperate and very patient and starting to lose their minds. But it's tough to be a Final Fantasy IX fan and see Square Enix has got something cooking. It's Final Fantasy VII. Oh, it's a spinoff. Okay. It's a remake of a spinoff of Final Fantasy VII. Yay. Can we just get a crumb of Final Fantasy IX, please? It was 23 years ago. Give us something. We've had ports, yes, which ports are fine. You can play it on your PS5. You can buy it in the store and play it on your PS5, which is great. But it still looks like a PS1 game. So please, Final Fantasy IX, it desperately needs it. Final Fantasy IX needs your help. Number 3, and again, you're going to laugh at me, and that's fine. That's why I'm here. I'm here to entertain you, so laugh away. Number 3 of my top 10 most wanted by me remakes, Final Fantasy VIII. Let's be real, y'all. A lot of these Final Fantasy games need remakes, okay? Tactics does, 9 does, and so does 8, for all the same reasons that 9 does, really. I mean, it came out in 1999? 99 or 98? Do your research, James. Again, we've had remasters of Final Fantasy VIII. February 1999. Okay, that's what I thought. And I remember I was so pumped for Final Fantasy VIII because it had more of a, was more kind of mature themed. It had actual, like, real looking human proportioned character models as opposed to Final Fantasy VII's little chibi, like, walk like this kind of models. The cutscenes, the pre-rendered cutscenes were gorgeous. The music was fantastic, flawless. It had its problems. People complained about certain aspects of Final Fantasy VIII, and I agree. I didn't like having to draw magic to use it. I didn't really understand the card game at the time. I really wanted to like it, but I couldn't wrap my head around it at the time. And there were just certain aspects of the game that didn't really click with me and with a lot of people. But I really want to give it a good chance. I want to give it another shake. But if you try to go back in 2023 and play a game made in 1999 that you didn't really love that much originally anyway, it's pretty rough. It is rough. And this is before Final Fantasy even had like 3D backgrounds, 3D areas that you were existing in. This was back in the PS1 days, just like Final Fantasy VII, just like the Resident Evil 1 and 2 and 3, where you had pixelated, pre-rendered backgrounds and a 3D model character moving in front of the backgrounds. And so it's just like you've got a painting and people walking in front of the painting and getting smaller as they walk away from the camera. And so it doesn't look great. It really doesn't. But, we have an opportunity here. Again, divert some of the resources that have been allocated for Final Fantasy VII spin-offs and remakes of spin-offs and whatever else for Final Fantasy VII. They're full, okay? They've filled their bellies. It's time for the Final Fantasy VIII fans and the Final Fantasy IX fans to eat something. They're starving over here, please, Square Enix. They're starving. Give us something. And again, you've seen the success of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And again, it's their biggest IP, I think. It's the one people love, which is fine. Final Fantasy VII is great. But you've seen how this works. Imagine if you did that with all these other games as well. It's just a license to print money, folks. It's a license to print money if you do it right. So again, you could get some voice acting. You could get, updated graphics. You could get larger areas. All these things I've been talking about. You could even put in the draw system. I don't care. I'd still give it a shot. I think it could be really good. It could revitalize 8 and rewrite its place in the annals of gaming history. You could give it a second chance at life so that it's no longer near the bottom of everyone's favorite Final Fantasy lists. And it's at the top. You could do it for Final Fantasy VIII. Do it for Squall. Anyway, okay. So we're down to the last 2. And one of them obviously is spoiled in the thumbnail. So I'm going to talk about one of those 2 right now. Let me take a sip of water. My poor throat still isn't quite used to talking for an hour straight. I still need to get my radio voice conditioned for talking for a long period of time. I'd eventually like to do this for 2 hours. Really, it's just a matter of like finding a time slot in the day where I can actually talk for 2 hours, where people are actually awake. I could start this at 5:30, but you know, who would watch? Who indeed? Number 2 on my top 10 list of remakes that I want. Number 2, again, you're going to laugh. Final Fantasy VI. Again, I'm just repeating myself. We've got our chunk of Final Fantasy games, all 4 in a row. Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy VI. We're just going back in time. Final Fantasy VI, highly regarded by many as one of the greatest games of all time, myself included. You can't beat the cast of characters that you have in Final Fantasy VI. The scale of the story, world-ending type stuff, like most Final Fantasies are. But the world, to me, in Final Fantasy VI is a character unto itself. I mean, it was such a big world with lots of interesting places. You had so many interesting side characters and interesting enemies. And obviously, I mean, this was a Super Nintendo game that you could remake into something modern here and now in 2023 or 2024, and it could be something amazing. It also, this is kind of like a high risk, high reward endeavor. And I would totally understand why devs would be hesitant to pick this one up and try to remake it, because it is so beloved. And really, any change that you make to a game like this, there's going to be a significant portion of people are not going to like that change because the original was so good, so beloved. You could give it modern graphics and 3D models in a 3D world, and people are going to say, it was perfect the way it was. Or give the people voices. Wow, they don't sound the way that they sound in my head. Or give it, a new spin on the gameplay. Instead of just being turn-based, put some action elements into it, and it's better the way it was. And so you're going to get those grumpy fans who are angry no matter what happens. And there's a lot of those types of people. But also, it has the potential to be something great, just like Final Fantasy VII Remake was. And I would argue that 6 has just as many fans as 7. They're older. Older fans. Like myself. But it could be something really incredible. And like I said, when you talk about the scale and the crazy stuff that happens in that game, translate that into modern graphics, modern lighting effects, put like the graphics and the fight scenes and stuff from Final Fantasy 16, right? Epic, particles flying everywhere, wonderful lighting. Put that in Final Fantasy 6, and you got some really cool stuff going on. I mean, was it Tabin? I don't remember which character it was. You're fighting the train. You fight an actual train. It's a ghost train, and he picks it up and slams it on the ground like a pro wrestler. A train. Like, imagine it with modern graphics. It would be incredible. It would be really incredible. You get a ninja with a ninja dog, a little wild child who goes crazy and bites enemies. It could be awesome. It could be the best game ever, potentially. Like, seriously, we need this. We need it right now. So yeah, that's my Final Fantasy block of games from my remake wish list. 5 through 2 are all Final Fantasy games, but they're great. And so many of the great ones are older and came out in a time when just the games kind of just looked a little bit like butt. They looked a little bit like butt, and that's okay. They just, a new lick of paint and some extra features would be good. Just whip that up. Just no deal. No big deal. Just whip up a Final Fantasy VI remake for me, Square Enix. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking for. Number 1 on my top 10 list of remakes that I would like to see. And this one is a very real possibility. It's a very real possibility. I've heard rumors. I think that Sony did some kind of, like, they copyrighted some phrase, or there was some kind of patent or something. They registered a name from this game that lent some support to the idea that it is going to be remade. because why would they sort of register a trademark with this name if they're not going to remake it? But number one, you guys know what I'm talking about because it's in the thumbnail. Number one, my most wanted game to be remade, Parasite Eve. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes. You want it too. Parasite Eve. Yes. And one of the more underrated games from the PS1 era, one of the more underrated series, because there was a sequel that I feel was just as good as the original, as the first one. But modern setting, modern New York, crazy, different gameplay. So it's a turn-based RPG, sort of, but you're using modern weapons. So you play as Eve, and she's a cop, right? And this sort of weird disease thing breaks out where this crazy lady monster can control beings' mitochondria and morph them into these horrible creatures. And so it's kind of like part detective mystery, part like horror action, part RPG. Like, it's a weird mix of a lot of different genres from a storytelling and a gameplay angle. And even the gameplay itself, like, it's not just a regular turn-based RPG. It's very much a good spin on that formula where you're not just stationary and I attack and then you attack. You're actually moving around the battlefield between turns. And so you've got your little like time gauge, and when it fills up, you can take an action. And so you're moving around that whole time and positioning yourself like away from enemies. And then when it's your turn, you open the menu and this little like kind of bubble appears around you that shows like the range of your attacks. And so you've got all these different kind of guns you can use. You've got melee attacks, you've got grenades and stuff like that. And it was just, I've really not seen many games use this type of combat. And it's kind of something you have to experience yourself. It's hard to explain, but it was very unique. And I feel like it would translate well just to give people something different to play even today. And again, it's a PS1 game. It's kind of ugly. It could use the graphical overhaul. It could use the voices. It could use everything. It's got one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard. I still listen to it regularly, even though I haven't played this game in like 20 years. It's fantastic. It's amazing. Please remake this game. I hope the rumors are true. I hope the rumors are true about Final Fantasy IX as well. A lot of these are just stuff I pulled out, games that I really like and want to play again in the modern era. And so there you have it. That's my top 10 list. Super Mario Kart, Shadows of the Empire, GoldenEye, Metal Gear Solid, Eternal Darkness, Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy VI, and Parasite Eve. That's my list. Those are what I want. So somebody make that happen right away. I've also got, I've got to get out of here in just a few minutes, but I've got some honorable mentions that I would like to talk about. And I know I kind of glossed over Parasite Eve, but it's just that apply all the things I've said before about the other games to Parasite Eve. It needs better graphics. It needs some better controls. It needs some voice acting. It needs bigger areas to explore. The game is sort of like mixed Silent Hill with Final Fantasy. And that's Parasite Eve. As crazy as that sounds. But, it's just good. And again, it's really, I think it's only available on PS1. You might be able to get a port of it on like later PlayStation systems. It might even be available on PC. I don't know. Again, do your research, James. But, much like Eternal Darkness, let's make some remastered ports at the very least so that people can play it on modern systems with slightly updated graphics, better textures and things like that. At the very least, you owe us, Square Enix, for Forspoken. Okay. We all got hyped up for Forspoken and it turned out to be really meh. So you owe us one. You owe us a Parasite Eve remake because of that horrible travesty. So that's my top 10 list. Here's some honorable mentions. These are ones that I would also love to see, but I didn't really stick them into my top 10 list because I didn't really know where they fit. These are kind of like take it or leave it type of situations. One such is Chrono Trigger. And much like Final Fantasy VI, I feel like this game is perfect. Chrono Trigger is perfect as it is. And when people talk about remaking old games, this one kind of pops up. And I could take it or leave it. it's kind of like, again, high risk, high reward from a dev's perspective, because you risk alienating a lot of core fans by making changes that they don't agree with. And I feel very strongly about Chrono Trigger. It's my number 2 most beloved game of all time. So maybe number 1. Number 2 or number 1. They kind of go back and forth with Symphony of the Night, but it's perfect the way it is. And I don't feel like it really needs anything to be changed, because it's like that later era Super Nintendo games. It's in that 2D, it's a beautiful 2D game with very few 3D elements. And so it doesn't have all that janky funkiness that a lot of PS1 games have. But it's fine the way it is. But if done right, if done correctly, it has the potential to be something really cool. And again, you could do the HD 2D style remake, just give it a good graphical overhaul, give it some new lighting effects, some new particle effects. I would be fine with just that. Give it the Octopath treatment and make it look really cool like that. I would definitely be on board with that. Don't change anything gameplay wise. Don't change anything else, but just update the lighting and the particle effects. That'd be perfect for me. That'd be fantastic. Time Splitters 2 is another one. Kind of random, but Time Splitters 1 was not that great, but 2 really took the game and ran with it. And it was just a funky game on the GameCube. I think it was on PS. It was on all the systems. It was a multi-platform, GameCube, Xbox, PS2. And it was a fantastic first-person shooter. The story was crazy. You're traveling through different time periods with all these crazy enemies. I've been really enjoying playing this. I have the GameCube version, so I've been playing it on my Wii with my kids every now and then. And you've got 4-player split screen, death matches. And we all have a blast with it because the characters are so crazy. You can play as like gargoyles and a snowman on a magic carpet and a man on fire and a guy in a lion suit. It's just a really silly first-person shooter. It focuses on fun, like obviously not realism, but it's really good. It doesn't need a remake, like I said, these honorable mentions don't, but it would be cool to get a remake. It'd be cool. Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, and I really raked Majora's Mask over the coals when I played it recently for pretty much the first time, and really the thing that bugged me the most about it was the controls. It has those awful N64 controls. There's no jump button and that kind of thing. So like navigating around the world was kind of a chore. Graphically, it's really meh because it's a 64 game. And if you could remake Majora's Mask for modern sensibilities, I'm okay with like the whole moon cycle thing and restarting and all the checkpoints and things like that. I can deal with that. But there were a lot of aspects about it that I didn't really like. And so it would be cool if Nintendo could give this one the remake treatment and, change a few things and make it a little smoother and add in some of those gameplay mechanics that we see in more modern games. It doesn't need to look and play and feel exactly like Breath of the Wild, for example, but, somewhere between like Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild, give it something in there, something along those lines. And I think it could be really good. Another one, Dark Souls. And again, I don't feel like this one needs a remake. Dark Souls is still a really good game. They gave it a remaster treatment, which is perfect. But ever since playing Blue Point's Demon Souls remake for the PS5, I've longed for the day to have Dark Souls get the same treatment. If you could get Blue Point to work on Dark Souls and give it that graphical overhaul, oh my goodness, it could be so gorgeous. It could be so gorgeous. And Dark Souls is my favorite from the whole Soulsborne series, aside from Elden Ring. Elden Ring is at the very top, and then right below it is Dark Souls, the first one. It just has a certain charm about it. And I like that there's not much music in it. It's there. But give it a good graphical overhaul like Demon Souls got, and oh my goodness, I could get lost in that one all over again. Here's some other ones really quickly before I get out of here. I'm just going to name them off. Xenogears, the precursor to the Xenosaga series, was really good back on PS1 days. Needs a graphical overhaul. Dino Crisis has a huge fan base. Capcom, I feel like you really stabbed us in the back with all of this exoprimal nonsense. People were hoping for Dino Crisis. You teased us with one of the character models. You got dinosaurs and a redheaded lady. It should have been Dino Crisis. and rightfully so, you are going to suffer for that one. But Dino Crisis remake would be fantastic, along with Parasite Eve. Let's get it. The Resident Evil remakes have been a huge hit. Dino Crisis could be too. It's a license to print money, you guys. Come on, just do it. And finally, my last honorable mention, Soul Reaver, Legacy of Kain. This was another wonderful game from the PS1 era that I feel could do really well in this day and age. You could get the nostalgic old farts like me who really want to play it again. And you had the cool like world switching mechanic that you see in new games like Lords of the Fallen, where you have two different worlds that you can swap between, and there are different things to experience in the different worlds and different game mechanics. But that was just a really cool game. You should remake it with voices. Give Ben Starr, the voice of Clive Rossfield in Final Fantasy 16, the opportunity to play the titular role as the Soul Reaver. Anyway, that's my list and another list. What do you guys think? What are your most wanted remakes? Leave me a comment underneath the video, of course. Am I crazy or what? Am I totally crazy? I'm sure there's like 20 or 30 other games that I've forgotten about that I would really love a remake of that I just didn't think of. So please put all those down in the comments. I'll try to respond to them all. Let's have a cool conversation. Thank you all so much for tuning in to podcast episode number 4. Like I said, I'm not going to be streaming tonight. I've got to work some overtime, but that's just the way it is sometimes in life. Anyway, you guys are the best. Have an awesome weekend, and I'll see you next time right here on JLG. Bye.